Antu, you are standing on the floor of an ancient ocean right now. Not near it, not close to it. You are standing exactly where a warm, shallow sea once stretched for millions of years, and every grain of sand beneath your feet used to be somebody's shell. Florida is not really land. Florida is a graveyard that learned how to float. 200 million years ago, there was no coastline here. There was no peninsula, no palm trees, no highway signs pointing toward the beach. There was only a submerged plateau sitting quietly beneath the water, catching the skeletons of trillions of tiny sea creatures as they died and drifted downward. Layer by layer, century by century, that falling rain of shells and skeletons became limestone, and limestone became the bones of a state that didn't exist yet. Have you ever wondered why Florida is so flat? The answer is written in that limestone. Geologist Albert Hine, who has spent decades studying the Florida platform at the University of South Florida, describes the peninsula as a limestone shelf that has risen and sunk with sea level for tens of millions of years. When the seas were high, Florida vanished beneath them. When the seas fell, Florida rose back into view, a little wider, a little more defined. This happened again, and again, like a coastline breathing in and out. You could say Florida was created by patience. Nothing about it was fast. Around 30 million years ago, the shape you recognize today started to emerge. Rivers cut through the porous limestone, carving sinkholes, caves, and the crystal-clear springs that still bubble up across the state. Water moved through rock the way blood moves through a body, finding every hidden channel, wearing pathways that would later become some of the most productive freshwater systems on Earth. Florida's underground plumbing was finished long before a single human foot ever touched its shore, and then the animals arrived. Paleontologist S. David Webb spent much of his career studying Florida's fossil record, and what he uncovered reads like fiction. Mammoths, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, camels wandering across a peninsula most people now associate with beaches and theme parks. Florida, long before it had a name, was a corridor for migrating giants, a bridge between North and South America during periods when land connections opened and closed. Every fossil pulled from its limestone is a message from an older Florida, stranger and wilder than the one you know. So when did people actually show up? Long before Spanish ships ever appeared on the horizon. Archaeologist James Dunbar, who has spent years excavating sites along Florida's Aucilla River, has helped establish that humans were present in Florida at least 14,000 years ago, hunting mastodons near sinkholes that still exist today. These were not passing visitors. They built lives here, following rivers, tracking herds. Learning the rhythms of a landscape shaped entirely by water. Generations passed, cultures formed. The Calusa built a kingdom of stilted homes and shell mounds along the Gulf Coast, engineering their world without metal, without wheels, without a writing system anyone has fully decoded. Then came 1513. Juan Ponce de León sailed along Florida's coast searching for gold, or perhaps something else entirely. Legend says he wanted a fountain of youth. What he actually found was a coastline unlike anything Spain had mapped before, teeming with a population just Europe had no framework to understand. He named it La Florida after the Spanish Easter season, Pascua Florida, the Feast of Flowers. It wasn't a name chosen for the land, it was a name chosen for the calendar. And somehow that accident of timing became permanent. Did Ponce de Leon know he was naming a peninsula that would take 4 more centuries to become a state? He didn't. Spain barely held on to Florida for most of that time. Pirates, hurricanes, disease, and constant conflict with indigenous nations turned Spanish Florida into one of the most fragile colonies in the Americas. Control shifted from Spain to Britain and back to Spain again. A tug-of-war fought over swampland nobody outside the region seemed to fully want. For a while, Florida even flew a British flag, part of an empire trying to hold territory it barely understood. Florida spent centuries as a borderland, a place other empires argued over more than they actually built. Everything changed in 1821. The United States acquired Florida from Spain, not with gold, but by canceling debts and settling old claims through the Adams-Honest Treaty. Spain, stretched thin and losing colonies across the hemisphere, let it go. Florida became a U.S. territory, and with that came a new wave of settlers, new roads, and a brutal, sustained effort to force out the Seminole people who had built a life in the peninsula's interior. 3 wars followed. The Seminole never fully surrendered. To this day, their descendants remain one.